Hello everybody. Let me see if we're on. I never tell. I'm by the waterfall. It's pretty. Hopefully I'll get that in the back. Oh, I wished I could still, I'm just going to do, I don't know, I might teach, but I stopped because I saw the water, and I like doing the videos with, so you catch the music, but I don't do that no more because YouTube silenced my videos because copyright, you know. But they did a remake on the rock station. It's 92.7 here in Corpus. It's kind of a new one, maybe for a year or so. But they play a lot of the remakes of the old music, you know, the newer kind of rock groups. And they did another one I like. I forget the group, but it's Here I Am on the Road Again. But they do it like, so I just heard it. I want to do a few, I guess I'll do a few notes. You get to see how pretty that is. On the terrorist things, attack, there's a lot of, I want to make a note. If you listen to the whole story and you pay attention and discern, obviously the guy was a terrorist, we understand this, Orlando. You'll notice one of the statements that either his wife or a family member made, his father is a little kind of nutty. He did some videos on Afghanistan and all, but one of them, I think it was his ex-wife who said, he used to say, "I hope they come to get me at the house, and then I'll shoot and all." They interviewed him correctly, the FBI, 3 times, I believe is what they said. And that he made radicalized statements at work and all, and rightfully so if you're talking about, you know, killing people or whatever, yes, if other people report that. And there's, you know, question, some people say, did the other non-radical Muslims report it? They're still kind of asking that, but it seems they did. It seems others that knew him reported him, either at his workplace or at the mosque or somewhere. But listen to the statement he made. He said, "I hope they come and interview me again at the house, and that way, you know, I can, you know, do something." It's important that you heard that statement from him. One of the other terrorist bombers out of Britain, I forget, maybe the Paris attacks, of course that's France, but I think the guy came out of Britain. Either way, I forget which one it was, but I remember he carried out a terrorist attack. It's a big one that took place in Europe somewhere. He also said, after I think he was killed and all, but he said that the British intelligence agency, Secret Service, they were also kind of like going after him. And from what I understand, he never made real radicalized statements, sort of like the one in this past week, the Orlando guy. But he said that he was not, some of his friends, another terrorist bomber, killer, he said some of his friends said that the British intelligence service somehow began, you know, you could say like harassing. That's how he understood it. The other one, not the recent one. And he said he felt like he didn't have a normal life anymore. And that set him over the edge. I don't justify, but what you see, and I have heard no media outlet link that yet. What you see is what's pushing them over the edge. People don't understand. In Egypt, you hear me talk about world affairs a lot. Egypt was the first country during what we referred to as the Arab Spring, meaning a lot of Arabs, Egyptians, Muslims, people in Saudi, in what we used to call Arabia, includes a lot of that, okay? Some of that spills over there into the northern part of Africa, so it's a little confusing at times for people. But in that part of the world, a lot of the younger Arabs, and all Arabs are not Muslims, okay? All Muslims are not Arabs, but many are. And a lot of the younger kids, not radicalized, nothing. A lot of them were just learning about what freedom was through the internet, okay? Facebook, things of that nature over the past 10 years. And a lot of them began seeing really a different way of life that they never saw before. Understand, if you were growing up 25 years ago as a young person in any part of that part of the world, maybe your way of life, living in an area that, you know, is not as good as the United States, or what we refer to as the Western world, Britain as well. Maybe you didn't ever realize what it was like to live in a more advanced country. But then with the explosion of online media and the access, which is a wonderful thing, a lot of the children became disenfranchised. A lot of the kids realized, cop just drove by my car just now. A lot of the kids began seeing, oh, we could have a much better life. And that led to protests. And really it started in Tunisia, but it kind of spread to Egypt, all right? And when Egypt began protesting, and President Obama was just in office for his first time he was elected. I believe that's correct. I know he was president when this happened. We had to make a decision in the United States, the Western world. Are we going to try to support some of the protesters? They're asking for change in Egypt. They're asking for things that we value as a society, which is freedom. And the president made like a decision that many allies, and if you remember, we talk politics so much, Hillary Clinton herself was very opposed to the decision President Obama made, okay? This is not politics. It is, but I'm saying this is true. The decision President Obama made was, we're going to sort of side with the protesters who basically want the leader of Egypt, who was there for 30 years, Hosni Mubarak. We're going to side for him to step aside. And you say, John, how do we do those things? I remember we have a lot of influence in many countries. Most of the generals for the military in Egypt were trained in the United States. A lot of people don't know that. At West Point, or military academy, where I grew up, okay, in the Northeast. Most of the generals knew all of our military guys. So there were a lot of connections. And I remember, because I followed at one point, this is the next guy that got in, whose name is Morsi. But at one point, this was reported, this is a news thing, they were deciding on some key things. Are we going to, are we going to topple our leader or not? And at one point, when the U.S. made known through its behind-the-scenes channels, I'm not saying it was wrong or corrupt, they were just deciding it's time for Mubarak to go. But at one point they said, I remember this, Mother has made the decision. And those Egyptian generals and leaders were referring to the United States. That's how much influence we did have at that time. And if the U.S. decided not to back, we've lost a lot of that influence. But if the U.S. decided not to back a foreign leader, just through influence, we had the power for that leader to go. Now, in this situation, I'm talking about Egypt, it wasn't wrong what the president did in the sense of, he said, I'm going to make a bold decision, and we're going to try to spread democracy. That's what it was about. And so Egypt did have an election. And you would say that's a good thing. They actually had a democratic election. It's going to be the history of Egypt in the last 7-8 years. And they elected a man by the name of Morsi. Morsi was supported by a Muslim political arm called the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay. The Muslim Brotherhood it made it into the politics of our country. I listen to talk radio, I watch news, liberal, it finally made it in where the Muslim Brotherhood, what they were was a political arm of Muslims who actually advocated for change, and they did not want to do it the terrorist route. But they certainly had connections with other people or groups being there from there. And it was made up of people that said, we're Muslims, we live in this part of the world, but let's go ahead and try and start a Muslim democratic movement. So I do not fault President Obama for siding with basically the overthrow of the leader of Egypt, who was Hosni Mubarak. That's the way he did it. And the politics, both conservative and liberal, are so biased that it's hard to really do anything on either side. Okay, Trump gave a fairly good speech yesterday, and he gave some specifics, and it was a good speech after the first speech he gave after the Orlando terrorist attack. Well, the media did the same thing. Fox News was just as biased as any other news, because I listened to the whole speech, maybe an hour, I forget. But it was impassioned. He meant what he said, okay? He's knowledgeable, okay? And then the Fox News reporter, after the speech, this is manipulation. He interviewed two people, or he said what two people said after the speech. Instead of listening yourself to the speech, he said, one person said, Trump doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's all confused or whatever. No. You could get any person that listened to a Hillary speech, Obama speech, Reagan speech. You could always find one person to ask, and you could go through 25 until you find the one that gives the answer that you want to broadcast on your news channel. That's manipulation. And so even Fox News, I felt, did it. The other person that the Fox News person said after the speech, he said he's all confused and there's no details. No, there were details, because I listened. You didn't have to need talking heads to interpret, okay? But that's what happened with the situation of President Obama's decision to back a democracy in Egypt. But as you can imagine, Al-Qaeda was the Muslim Brotherhood, something like that. As you can imagine, there would be a backlash. Because in the conservatives, I listen to them all, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, then Muslim Brotherhood, but they elected the man by the name of Morsi. And it was a legitimate election. Now, we in the United States, and President Obama, we wanted Mr. Morsi to succeed. Because then what it would have done is it would have shown the young people in that part of the world, you have another option. You don't have to go to radical terrorism to effect change. You can do it through a democratic process. That's what we were shooting for in the support of what was called the Arab Spring, which we don't refer to it that way anymore. And you've heard me also critical of the president for siding with the toppling of Mubarak, because we did. And it was because we had long-standing allies in that region that were shocked that we did that, because we almost had a peace treaty. We did, basically, but we worked with Egypt. They're a strong ally of the U.S. And Hillary Clinton at that time, she wasn't faking it, this was not political, she was upset that President Obama decided to go that route. Now remember, she said, we ate dinner with him, we sat with him, he was a political figurehead that we worked with, and we decided to allow him to be toppled, eventually imprisoned, tried him, and then I think it's in between now. Because what happened, the new man that was elected by the name of Morsi, he really was not, he was obviously a strong Muslim. His political party was the Muslim Brotherhood, but he was not working in coordination develop a constitution and so forth. And he was kind of going the Sharia law route, which no, this is going to be a strong, which is what we call theocracy. It's going to be like a religious political realm, which of course we didn't want. Now the president at the time, Obama, began trying behind the scenes things and saying, no, we want you to work in. But he was elected. And eventually they had another quote like revolution, and the military backed it was like a coup basically, just took him out. Somebody else got in. At that point we lost a lot of influence over that period of time, in a few-year period. And I saw some other things that Egypt actually did through the military leaders and all that they would have never done before. But then they realized, the U.S. does not have the influence. Israel and other countries, when that happened, even those that are not really pro-Egypt, they were also thrown for a loop, thinking the way it used to be has changed. And also, this is just not critical of Obama. The influence of the U.S. really went to the wayside. And you have China and Russia, as I make this political video. But just yesterday, we decided we're going to put 4,000 NATO troops, U.S. troops, build up in Poland. And that's a big mistake, because President Putin of Russia has made clear, and I've talked about a lot, I won't explain all, but he has made clear, he said, you're pushing us to the limit here, U.S., because you're putting NATO troops who Russia deem as a real threat, and Russia is right. I've explained all that before. And if you go through with it, and we are, China also again is beginning challenging. And I'll give you a little insight. Maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, China's challenging territory in the China Sea, but that area in the China Sea is disputed, okay? Vietnam and other Asian countries, argue. It's our sea, it's our sea. So for many years, that area in the China Sea, though China's claimed it, but it said it's ours for a while as well. So we have allies there, and we basically, as long as nobody made a real attempt to take it as their own part of one of their countries, we had a long-standing thing that said that's kind of neutral territory. And we said to those other nations, Vietnam and all, just try to work out a deal. But it's going on for years and years. So China a few years ago said, we're going to do it. We're just going to take it. Now in the old days, that would almost be considered something that the U.S. would almost, and we use statements like it destabilizes the world order. We could never use that statement again because of many, many things, how we have destabilized the world. But now they took it, and I remember, they challenged us. We flew a couple of planes within the limit of those islands, which we've been doing for years. China warned us, sends out fighter planes too, telling us no. And then finally, you said, what was the resolve? Who won that one, John? China won it. And you don't see it because then a week or so later, just a few weeks ago, John Kerry says, I'm going to China and I'm going to have a talk with them. John Kerry, Secretary of State for U.S. And I thought, oh, it's over. They took it. And then in the discussions were like, we really don't want you to take it because we prefer you to talk to these other partners. And China's response was, it's ours. And that's it. And in that one instance I just explained to you, those other countries who always thought maybe the U.S. will never allow it, it's just been allowed. And that doesn't get a lot of public play. I'm not siding with China, against China. I'm saying I want you to see how the world stage has indeed changed, okay? I've done a lot of that over the last, talking like that over the last few months. Maybe this will be the actual teaching video, but these issues are important. I don't fault President Obama for wanting to help spur democracy in that part of the world, because that would have been a key tool to fight radical Islam. Because then the younger Muslims, they would have had another option, which was called democracy. But the mistake that Mr. Morsi made, who is now out, waiting trial, I think they convicted him too. I pray for Morsi. You see, you're crazy, John. He's part of that regular prayer. Why? When I pray for the oppressed of the earth, this is the Monday, Friday intercession, and I pray for all Muslims, all Christians and all Jews. I do this. The children of them. And then I pray for all that are oppressed. And I use a verse from Revelation, particularly for the Christians. I don't apply this to Morsi or others. It says, how long, O Lord, before you avenge their blood upon the earth? And I say, Lord, all those that have been martyred these last few years, I lift that up to you. How long before you avenge their blood? And part of that prayer, I also then pray, Lord, for all political prisoners, Mr. Morsi, by name, and all others. Because God, obviously, he wants all men to come to the knowledge of the truth, which is in Jesus Christ. And I don't want any of my friends to misunderstand me. I don't believe there are many roads to God. There's only one way to the Father, and that's through Jesus Christ, the Son. But also in Scripture it says, live peaceably with all men. Love your enemies, things of that nature. Meaning, you might have a good Muslim man. I had a Christian friend of mine, a pastor, and his doctor was Muslim. This was years ago. But he used to say he did a great job. And I'm sure some of us might have Muslim mechanics or whatever. Now that does not mean we embrace their beliefs, but it means we could live peaceably with all men. That's what that means. And all people are created, all people, even those who are not born of God, even those who are part of cults. You see, all people were created in the image of God. They bear a special image. John, but in the Gospel of John, which you're teaching right now, Jesus said to the Pharisees, you are of your father the devil. That's right. Because they were rejecting the revelation of God through Christ, but they were still created by God. And Paul will teach men who were created in the image of God after they fell away from God, that the spirit of disobedience now works in them. So when Jesus said to those religious leaders in the book of John, you are of your father the devil, I think it's John 8:44, and the works of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning. He said, you're going about to try and kill me. He said that. Who's going to kill you? Are you crazy? They didn't realize he was right. They really didn't realize that they were going to lead to the point where they would actually kill him. But he knew. I quoted that verse in the video recently, the last two verses of John 2. It said Jesus was at the feast. You see, when you're at the feast, pastors, listen to me. Preachers, listen to me. Say, John, it's hard to listen to you because you curse, you do bad. That's all I do, okay? Smoke. I'm not sleeping around. Some might say, you are. I'm not. Now, or anything else. So, he was at the feast. I might as well teach a little. And he said, all the people, the last two verses of John chapter 2, it said all the people were so excited at the feast day. This is not the time of the crucifixion, which was also a time of a feast. Okay, Passover. And it said they were so happy that Jesus, at that moment, they were accepting of him among the populace. And it says they really wanted to quote his ministry. Oh, we love you, Pastor. But then it said, but he would not commit himself unto any, because he knew what was in man. He knew. Not that he came to redeem man, but he understood. If his focused vision to do the will of the Father, if it somehow got tainted with all the things that you see where people say, oh, yeah, yeah. And then all of a sudden we lose focus. We think the purpose is just to get people to like us. You see, that we're going to come to a verse in Timothy where it says, and it's a strong chapter, and every one of my prosperity gospel friends, I understand it all. I used to be very excited to watch Kenneth Copeland. I listened to Kenneth Hagin on a regular basis, and I enjoyed all of it. But I just felt they were, over time, I said, oh no, this is not on track here. This is not on track. 1 Timothy 6, which I was quoting the other day, which Paul says, there will be some who will teach, gain is godliness, from such turn away. We came into the world without it. When we leave, we cannot take it with us. Having food and living with content. Because others that went that route, they swerved away from the faith. And it says, in the end times, people will raise up to themselves teachers, having itching ears. That's a King James. It sounds like it's saying the teachers. What does that mean? People will be attracted to want to hear preaching that satisfies them. And you know, I've done somewhat of investing over the years, and I used to have rent houses, manage one, own one, sold one, the whole house sold. I've done that. And I used to watch all the investment. They talk a lot about Trump because of that real estate school. It was so skewed because the World News was quoting Trump in his real estate school saying OPM, other people's money. And they made it look like he was out to rob other people. That's taught in all of those types of investment things. I've been in them. And that's a principle that's taught. It doesn't mean you're out to connive people out of their money. What that means is it's synergy. Other people become investing in whatever it is, and then it multiplies. I've heard many good men, Christian men, that's called OPM, other people's money. But it was so deceptive that the world news media decided to use that, because they did. Trump wanted to use other people's money. They did it in a way that was deceptive, because that's part of investing. I've seen it before. Oh, some guy's going to fish. But I think I'm about done anyway. But it says, when I listen to a lot of those real estate shows, it says, you become, I used to watch Wall Street Week, the Louis Rukeyser. I was very much, watching all the financial stuff. It was a big thing for me. And when I used to listen to a lot of the preaching along those lines, I could quote many of the verses, key chapters. The Lord God has given us the ability to get wealth, that he might establish his covenant in the earth. Okay? Many. That's Deuteronomy. And these are key ones, and I used to read through those chapters regularly. But the focus became wealth, even for me, because that was part of that movement. And then you get comfortable with it. And I had a friend of mine come over one day, and I put on Kenneth Copeland. This is not, listen to me, I'm not criticizing him. But when I put on Kenneth Copeland, my other friend was ordained through the prosperity movement, that type of church. And he said, oh, he didn't see Kenneth Copeland in a while on TV, but he said it was just like coming back home. And I used to watch Kenneth Copeland and listen to him. But I just felt there was the little books I've been posting talk about that, okay? And it's hard. Some of you that might have been raised in that, reared in that, it's a battle to move on from it. It's a battle because you become comfortable with seeing those scriptures a particular way. And that's why Jesus said, out of all the things he said that compete against the kingdom, the one thing he said, you cannot serve God and money. You cannot serve God and mammon, that's money. You either will love the one or hate the other, or hold to the one, despise the other. And I speak a prophetic word to my friends, pastors that are in this movement. When you begin to try to seek truth in this area, it's a battle. Because Jesus himself said, you'll either hold to the one or the other. And Jesus said nothing else competes for your affections in the kingdom like money, like the love of it, okay? That's what he taught. All the things he could have done. So that'll be it. I hope this will be a teaching video. And I hope you like the nice waterfall. These brothers are going to fish. Oh, they're going to catch bait. It looks nice, okay? And then that's it. I bless you guys. Father, I pray a blessing on all of our friends, all of our people. I pray as they watch the videos, they share them, they take the teachings, that the word of the Lord will go forth. Scripture says, enlarge the place of this town. Let them stretch forth the curtains of these habitations. Spare not, lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes. For you will bring forth on the right hand and on the left. Your seed will inherit the Gentiles, and make desolate cities to be inhabited. And you will be called repairers of the breach, restorers of the Our people will be like fountains, dispersed abroad. So I pray a blessing. I pray the word of the Lord to go out. In Jesus' name.